History remembers many rulers, but few were monsters who murdered millions in plain sight. This is the story of Mao Zedong, and how one man's delusion turned a nation into a graveyard. In 1949, Mao Zedong took control of China. He promised hope. He promised equality. He promised a new world. What he delivered was something far darker. Behind closed doors, in shadowed halls of power, he was planning something unthinkable. A transformation so brutal, so complete, it would reshape the very fabric of human suffering. And no one could stop him. For 27 years, he held 540 million people in the grip of terror. What he called the Great Leap Forward was actually a descent into hell. Mao forced 30 million peasants into labor camps. No choice, no escape, just work or die. The quotas were impossible, unrealistic, lethal. Families were forced to work 18 hours a day. Children collapsed in the fields. The elderly were left to starve. The numbers are almost impossible to comprehend. Between 15 to 45 million people starved to death across China. Historians still argue about the exact toll, but the silence speaks louder than any number ever could. In Hunan, entire villages were wiped out. In Shandong, families ate bark from trees before they succumbed. In Anhui, the screams echoed through cities as mass executions took place in the streets. Torture was not random. It was systematic. Starvation was not accidental. It was policy. People were beaten for eating crops they grew. Children were punished for hunger. And Mao, he watched from his palace. He demanded higher quotas. He wanted faster results. He wanted more blood. But the horror wasn't finished. In 1966, Mao, now in his 70s, felt his grip weakening. So he launched something even more sinister. The Cultural Revolution, a reign of terror designed to destroy everything. Chinese tradition, ancient culture, education, art, any voice that dared to question him. Intellectuals were hunted down and beaten. Teachers were tortured in front of their students. Scientists disappeared. Writers were silenced. Students were forced to turn on their own parents out of pure, paralyzing fear. Red Guards, teenager soldiers, roamed the streets with weapons. They attacked anyone suspected of being counter-revolutionary. The definition changed daily. It didn't matter. They just needed an excuse. Over 500,000 people were brutally killed. Maybe more. The real number? It died with the victims in unmarked graves. Burning cities weren't just metaphors. Libraries were set ablaze. Temples were destroyed. Monasteries were ransacked. Centuries of history was erased, replaced only by blood, ash, and screams. Mao built an empire of terror unlike anything the modern world had seen. Surveillance consumed every corner of society. Neighbors reported neighbors. Children betrayed their parents. Spouses turned against each other. Trust became a luxury no one could afford. Political prisoners vanished into camps, places like Laogai, hidden from the world. They were tortured, starved, worked until their bodies simply gave out. Most never left alive. Execution methods were designed to terrify. Public hangings, mass trials, humiliation, degradation. The goal was simple: break the human spirit completely. Entire families were punished for the crimes of one person. Guilt by association became law. Your neighbor could kill you. Your child could condemn you. And there was nothing you could do about it. Conservative estimates say Mao was responsible for the deaths of 40 to 80 million people. Some historians argue it was far higher. Families were torn apart. Generations were scarred. A nation's soul was fractured, perhaps forever. Yet he died in 1976 as a great leader. Streets were lined with mourners forced to grieve. The system he created protected his legacy. Mao Zedong proved one terrifying truth: the greatest monsters in history are not born in darkness. They rise to power in broad daylight, and the world watches in silence. Joseph Stalin. History remembers many tyrants, but few were as ruthless as Joseph Stalin. He didn't just rule through power. He ruled through blood, through fear, through the systematic erasure of human life itself. In 1924, after Lenin's death, Stalin consolidated power in the Soviet Union. Slowly, methodically, ruthlessly, what followed was one of history's darkest chapters. A reign of terror that would claim millions of lives and transform an entire nation into a prison of fear. For 25 years, Stalin held the Soviet people in an iron grip, and no one could escape it. Stalin feared enemies everywhere, even where they didn't exist. So he created them. Between 1936 and 1938, Stalin launched what became known as the Great Purge, a systematic campaign to eliminate anyone he suspected of disloyalty, anyone who questioned him, anyone who simply knew too much. The numbers were staggering. Over 750,000 people were executed, shot in the back of the head in basements, dragged from their homes at midnight, tortured until they confessed to crimes they never committed. Families were destroyed overnight. A husband disappeared, then a wife, then the children. Sometimes, the entire family was erased, as if they never existed. In Moscow, in Leningrad, in every city across the Soviet Union, the screams echoed through secret police headquarters. The NKVD, Stalin's terror apparatus, worked around the clock. Arrest, interrogation, torture, execution, then silence. And the fear was absolute. But Stalin's cruelty extended beyond executions. In Ukraine, between 1932 and 1933, Stalin deliberately starved an entire nation. The Holodomor, the killing by hunger. Stalin's forced collectivization policies stripped farmers of their grain. The quotas were impossible. He took everything, leaving nothing for the people to eat. Between 3 to 10 million Ukrainians died of starvation. Children, mothers, entire villages reduced to skeletal remains. Reports describe the unimaginable: families eating tree bark, cannibalism, bodies piled in mass graves, the silence of death spreading across the Ukrainian landscape. And Stalin knew. He watched. He didn't care. For those who survived arrest, a different kind of hell awaited. The Gulags, Stalin's vast network of labor camps scattered across frozen Siberia and the Soviet wasteland. Millions were imprisoned there. Political prisoners, intellectuals, artists, entire families sent for the crime of being related to someone deemed disloyal. The conditions were designed to break you. Extreme cold, starvation, brutal forced labor, torture, disease. The mortality rate was catastrophic. Prisoners worked until they died, building railroads, mining gold, breaking rocks. Their bodies were dumped into mass graves, unmarked, forgotten, erased. Over 18 million people passed through the Gulag system during Stalin's reign. Most never came out alive. Stalin's secret police were everywhere. They listened, they watched, they reported. You couldn't trust your neighbor, your friend, your own family. A careless word meant death. A suspicious glance meant arrest. A moment of hesitation meant disappearance. Children were encouraged to inform on their parents. Colleagues betrayed colleagues. The paranoia was suffocating, total, inescapable. Between purges, famine, war, and gulags, Stalin was responsible for the deaths of 20 to 40 million people. Some estimates go higher. He created a totalitarian nightmare where human life meant nothing, where terror was the only law. Stalin proved that the most dangerous monsters are not wild beasts. They wear suits, they sit behind desks, and they smile while they destroy everything around them. His darkness still haunts the world today. Benito Mussolini. History remembers many dictators, but few possess the theatrical madness of Benito Mussolini. He promised glory. He delivered only blood. And for 21 years, he transformed Italy into a nightmare of fascism, violence, and terror. In 1922, Mussolini marched on Rome. He didn't come with reason. He came with black shirts, armed thugs, paramilitary violence. The Italian people didn't choose fascism. Fascism was forced upon them, at gunpoint. Mussolini promised to restore Italy to greatness. What he actually created was a totalitarian state built on fear, propaganda, and systematic brutality. A machine designed to crush anyone who dared oppose him. For more than 2 decades, Italy lived in shadow. Mussolini's paramilitary forces, the Black Shirts, roamed Italian cities like predators. They attacked political opponents. They beat journalists. They tortured intellectuals. They burned down opposition newspapers. Anyone who spoke against Il Duce disappeared. The violence was savage, organized, systematic. In Rome, in Milan, in Naples, in Florence, the screams of the tortured echoed through underground prisons. Secret torture chambers became commonplace. Opposition politicians were dragged from their homes, never to be seen again. Thousands were arrested without trial. Thousands more were exiled to remote islands. Some were simply executed. The fear was suffocating, total. But Mussolini's brutality extended far beyond Italy's borders. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia, a sovereign nation, unprovoked, defenseless against his modern military machine. What followed was one of Africa's darkest chapters. Italian forces used chemical weapons, mustard gas, poison. They dropped bombs on villages filled with civilians. Hospitals, schools, churches. Over 500,000 Ethiopians were killed. Entire cities were destroyed. The brutality was medieval, savage, unrelenting. Mussolini ordered the systematic slaughter of the Ethiopian population. He wanted to erase them, to remake Ethiopia as an Italian colony built on corpses. The world watched in horror. The League of Nations condemned him. Mussolini didn't care. He had tasted conquest, and he wanted more blood. In 1936, Mussolini forged an alliance with Adolf Hitler. The Axis powers, 2 dictators, 2 visions of darkness. One shared goal, the conquest and domination of the world. Together, they would plunge Europe into World War II. Millions would die because of this alliance. Mussolini supported Franco's fascists in Spain. He invaded Albania. He sent Italian soldiers to fight in North Africa. Thousands of innocent lives were shattered, burned cities, destroyed families, endless bloodshed. And when Italy began losing the war, Mussolini's grip only tightened. Opposition was crushed harder. Executions increased. The machinery of terror accelerated. Mussolini created OVRA, a brutal secret police force that operated in the shadows. They spied on citizens. They arrested dissidents. They tortured prisoners in hidden locations. Concentration camps were established. Dissidents were sent to die in isolation. Free speech was extinct. Free thought was dangerous. The media was controlled. Propaganda was constant. Reality itself was redefined by Mussolini's regime. Italy became a nation of fear, of suspicion, of unquestioning obedience. During Mussolini's 21-year reign, over 4 million people died as a result of his wars and policies. Millions more were tortured, displaced, traumatized. He allied with Hitler. He invaded nations. He used chemical weapons on the defenseless. He created a totalitarian nightmare that consumed an entire generation. Mussolini proved that evil dressed in a uniform still bleeds the same. And in the end, even tyrants fall. But the scars they leave behind haunt forever. Ivan the Terrible. History remembers many tyrants, but none were as psychologically unhinged as Ivan the Terrible. He didn't just rule Russia. He consumed it, twisted it, transformed it into a kingdom of blood and madness that would echo through centuries. In 1547, Ivan forecrowned himself Tsar of all Russia. He promised order. He promised strength. What he delivered was something far darker. Ivan began as a reformer, a visionary, but power, absolute power, corrupted him completely. His mind fractured, his empathy evaporated, and Russia would pay the price. For 37 years, Ivan ruled through paranoia, through suspicion, through an obsession with total control that would cost thousands their lives. He became Ivan the Terrible. In 1565, Ivan created the Oprichnina, his secret police. his personal army of darkness, dressed in black, carrying severed dog heads as symbols of their loyalty. The Oprichnina answered to no one but Ivan. They were his instruments of pure terror. Their job was simple: eliminate anyone Ivan deemed a threat. And Ivan's paranoia knew no bounds. Thousands of nobles were arrested, tortured, executed, their lands confiscated, their families destroyed. Entire bloodlines were erased from existence. The torture chambers became infamous, instruments of unimaginable cruelty. People were stretched on racks, burned, hung by their limbs. Some were slowly boiled alive. The screams lasted for hours, until their bodies finally gave out. Execution was public, theatrical. Ivan wanted Russia to watch, to understand the price of defiance, to live in perpetual, absolute terror. But Ivan's madness reached its apex in Novgorod. In 1570, Ivan became convinced that the city was plotting against him. There was no evidence, no proof, just paranoia, delusion, the ravings of a fractured mind. Ivan invaded the city with 15,000 soldiers. What followed was a massacre that would be remembered for centuries. For 5 weeks, Ivan's forces slaughtered the population. Men, women, children, the elderly. No mercy, no distinction, just blood. Between 60,000 to 100,000 people were murdered. Some were hanged, some were drowned, some were burned alive in their homes. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash. The Fokhov River ran red with blood. Bodies were dumped into the water by the thousands. The stench of death consumed the city. Survivors huddled in shadows, praying they wouldn't be next. And Ivan watched it all, smiling. Ivan's paranoia was all-consuming. He saw enemies everywhere. In his court, among the nobility, even in his own family. He had his own son beaten to death. Ivan the Younger, his heir, murdered by his own father in a fit of rage. Spies infiltrated every level of society. Neighbors reported neighbors. Children betrayed parents. Trust became a fatal vulnerability. Moscow became a city of ghosts. Empty streets, whispered conversations, the constant fear of midnight arrests. Over 40,000 people were executed during Ivan's Oprichnina period alone. Some estimates placed the total death toll even higher. Ivan's reign transformed Russia, not into a stronger nation, but into a traumatized one. He conquered territories. He expanded Russia's borders. But at what cost? A generation scarred by terror. A culture of fear that would shape Russian society for centuries. Ivan died in 1584, alone, paranoid, still convinced his enemies surrounded him. Ivan the Terrible proved that even a czar can descend into madness. And when he does, entire nations suffer the consequences. His shadow still darkens Russia to this very day.